would take jobs that you felt less
Exactly.
secure about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
An actual job, you would take it.
Welcome to the Mother Together podcast. This is Tianna.
This is Ariel, and we're two moms empowering other mamas not to settle in their motherhood, relationships, careers, and self-worth. So today we have a special guest with us, and it is my hubby, Zarod Myers.
Hey.
We're going to be talking about the virtual assistant role, and we're going to kind of take a husband's perspective and kind of talk about that, since we do get a lot of questions from husbands of women that want to pursue the virtual assistant world. Mm-hmm. So we're going to just dive in and start talking about what we always talk about with people when they're like wondering what the virtual assistant role is, and just talk about what a virtual assistant is.
One of the main questions everyone has is, what is a virtual assistant? So a virtual assistant can be lots of different things. First off, we like to say that it's not an MLM, it's not direct sales, it's not a pyramid scheme, it's not a call center, it is not sales. You are not getting paid by commission. So a lot of people nowadays are more familiar with the term freelancer. So that's basically what you are. You will provide any service that like an entrepreneur or like a business owner may need. You could provide that virtually to them.
So an easy way to kind of understand what the virtual assistant role really is to understand the type of tasks you'll be doing. So we always describe it as any admin position that you can imagine in an office. A lot of those tasks that they do, that's what you would do virtually as an assistant, as a virtual assistant. And so some of those tasks, and this is like a very short list, but some of those tasks would be general admin support, copywriting, calendar management, recruiting, creating meal plans, event planning, a social media manager. We have a lot of those ladies in our program. Bookkeeping, project management, research, editing podcasts, booking travel, organizing and creating systems, responding to emails, transcription, personal assisting, data entry, creating itineraries, email management, maintaining a website, and so much more. So, babe, what do you think that I do all day in my job? Not just with the kids, but working-wise.
I think that you support other people in their goals.
That's a really good answer.
That's a really good answer.
Yeah.
Do you think you would be able to list the day-to-day actual tasks that I do?
No.
Okay.
I have no idea.
That's pretty common, I feel like.
You manage a lot of emails.
Yeah, sure.
You manage a lot of...
No, this is painful.
He's looking at me like, Tianna, give me an answer. What does she do?
Write it down and show it to me.
Just a lot of things that you do.
So, I mean, this is very common. I mean, you're doing a lot of things, and sometimes it can change day to day. So, and that's, I mean, whenever I describe what I do for people, I usually do just say, like, I'm supporting clients or business owners in their day-to-day tasks and things
It's
like
such
that.
a hard answer, like, to give people, because everyone does a little bit of different things, and like each day looks a little bit different,
Mm-hmm.
unless they've hired you just to do social media or just for like a specific task. But like when people ask me like, well, what do you do, or like what would I be doing, it's like, I don't know. What do you want to do? Like, what are you good at? What skills do you already have? And then that's how you turn yourself into a virtual assistant, is you take like the skills that you already have and you can make a business out of that.
And I love that you made that point, because we talk to so many women that are like, oh, well, I'm an RN, like I work in an emergency room, so my role is so far from that, I could never do something like that. Mm-hmm. And that is like so far from the truth. And I think, I know that a lot of husbands of the women that we talk to, they kind of fuel that doubt, because, it's very hard to understand. So husbands will say, like, you have no skills in that area, because they kind of perceive this role as either like completely foreign, or they think of it as like, okay, well, it's online, so you're probably doing like coding or some sort of like customer service, or, like a call center or something like that. So they get really nervous about the skills that they think that their wife doesn't have, when in reality, you're not really doing any of those things, because like we said, that's on this is what a virtual assistant does not do list. So
yeah, so that kind of brings us in of why people don't start a virtual assistant business. So I have lots of calls with lots of different women, and it seems like one of the main answers that they get back with me, they're like, I really wanted to do this, but my husband's not on board. He thinks this is a scam. And so I have spent like hours on the phone with husbands, and one in particular, he was like, I mean, I feel like I could feel him rolling his eyes like through the phone. Like the tension was there. He was not like having it, but he did let her sign up and join the course. And she got a client like super quick. So we like joke about it. And I said, I need to have a follow-up call with your husband.
But you also called him out too, because you talked to him so long, and at the end you were just like, okay, listen, it sounds like you just don't think that your wife can do this. And at that point he was like, well, I can either admit that or just say like, okay, she can enroll if she wants to.
Yeah, because I mean, on these calls with these husbands, I'll cover everything. I'll answer all their questions. And then they get to a point where they're like, okay, like either they're just stuck in their ways and this is a scam because like who can make money from home, even though it's 2021 and like majority of people are. But, you know, either that or they're finally like, whatever you want to do. And then they do that and they feel like
just tire them down.
Yes. So, and it's so fulfilling when they all get clients because you're like, can I have a follow-up call with your husband?
How do you feel about this now?
The first thing I always ask is like, what'd your husband say when you got that client?
Yeah. So what did you think, babe, whenever I first started my virtual assistant career? I will say you're a very supportive husband. But when I first got into the virtual assistant world, I remember after my very first day, you came home and you had flowers for me, and like back when magazines were a thing, like my favorite magazine, and I think some like chocolates or something. And I was like, that is so sweet. Like for my first day of what was work but didn't feel like it, you brought me that home. So like, what were you thinking? Were you like, oh, this is cute that she's like dabbling in this new hobby, or what did you think?
No, I didn't think it was cute. I mean, I viewed it as, I think we talked about it a lot beforehand. So I understood the role, or what I thought the role was, and I viewed it as a real position. And I think that the way that I explain it to people a lot of times is I'll just say, oh, my wife works from home, which now they just think it's a result of the situation that we're in. And I'm like, oh, no.
But you did get a lot of beforehand, like, oh, no, she doesn't give out her social security number. I mean, you've legit had people say that to you.
Yeah, and they would be like, well, how many times has she gotten paid? Is she sure that the company is legitimate? And I was like, yes. Oh, it was painful.
Yeah, it is painful.
But I think, like, when I tell people that, I just say, I have them imagine the things that they maybe get caught up doing every month that they might not want to do in their role. And they're like, oh, yeah, I could see that. And then I ask them how much they would pay a person to do those things for them. And then they're all like, oh, and they come around to it and they see it more as something that could be useful to them and their role in their position. So I've learned to explain it better to other people, but it's still kind of foreign.
And I will say, like, in the typical 9-to-5 working world, especially like where we are, which is like the Midwest, so it's a little more small town minded. The assistant role in general is like, I feel like is a very foreign thing, because when you think of an admin support person in an office, it's usually a secretary or someone who just like answers the calls, they book appointments. Yeah, very underpaid, because they believe that it doesn't take a lot of skill or experience to do that role. But those people don't understand all the things that assistant could do. And that is why they're comfortable paying them $10 an hour, $12 an hour, because they think, oh, they're just answering phones and sending calls to, one of the offices. But what they're not imagining is someone who like literally comes in and partners with them in their role as like a CFO or a CEO or whatever to help them get their job done, not just manage the ins and outs of, the office. And I think that's what's hard, is because a lot of even like corporate positions don't have an EA. So whenever people hear like assistant or personal assistant, they think of like a celebrity or something that has a personal assistant, like managing their calendar and things like that. So you also have to go out of that mindset of what an assistant can actually be and look like before you even think about it virtually. So a big thing, that people wonder, okay, well, I get like that maybe I can be a virtual assistant, but most importantly, like what can I make? So this is obviously a question that we get all the time.
So starting out 5 years ago, I started at $15 an hour. By the end of that month, I was making $20 an hour, and I've quickly worked my way up to $38 an hour. And like I always tell everybody, I could easily raise my rate with my clients, but I'm happy where I'm at and they're happy. So, I'm good. But I know assistants who charge, $75 an hour. And so that's something else. So like a lot of the husbands, they just can't comprehend. Here they are doing like majority of them hard labor, making the same exact amount or a little bit less. And they're like, why would somebody pay you to sit at home and pay their bills? Well, because they do, because to them, these business owners could be doing like a million other things, you know, building their empire, and they don't have time to pay their bills. Like, I mean, yesterday I spent an hour just paying medical bills for one of my clients. So it was a simple task. I made doctor's appointments for him at the same time. And so it was very simple, but it's so time consuming for them.
Yeah. And I mean, think about just as a mom, like when you have to go and make those doctor's appointments for your kids and for you or whatever, especially if you're like me, like an introvert, like you don't like having to do that. So think of if you're running like a business and then having to take time and your energy away from what your focus is to focus on that type of task. You're going to push it until it just never happens. So I started off working for an agency. So I actually, made way less than I would have made as a self-employed VA. So I started off at $10 an hour, which still was a big deal because it was like, okay, I'm doing this from home. My son's with me. I don't have to send him to daycare. And it's fun. I really like it. And I remember what was the first thing that we did with my VA checks.
We bought a car.
Yeah. It was my first brand new car.
The Kia.
It was a Kia. But I thought that was so cool that I could have something that was all mine. I really hadn't had the opportunity yet because obviously I was reliant on my husband's income. And so we didn't think that we'd be able to have a second vehicle, which kind of sucked as a stay-at-home mom to be stuck in the house all day while my husband worked. So being able to just like have this income, and it was really just me getting a taste of the opportunity. And so we were able to buy this second car for myself. So I bought it. And, from there I was like, oh, wow, you can really make money from this. And when I started working as a self-employed VA, I was charging $25 an hour. And then within 3 months, upped it to $30, and now I charge $40 an hour. So like Tianna said, like it goes really quickly. It's not something where you're waiting like years to get a 50-cent raise or anything. So that's also very foreign to husbands who, especially around here, like work labor jobs or a 9-to-5 that's very strict with their raises and things like that. But you have to think of it like a plumber. Mm-hmm. I always use that analogy because he's at our house so often because our girls stick things down the toilet. But, if their demand rises, their rates are going to rise. So our plumber was here for like 15 minutes the other day, and it was like a $130 visit. It was on a Saturday.
Wow.
But, if there's a lot of people coming in or asking for them to come in, they can do that. But nobody questions that. No one's like, oh, that sounds like a scam. Plumbers must be a scam. No one does that.
That's very true. No, nobody does that. Yeah. So we teach a lot of our ladies to start around $20 to $25 an hour. That's the average. Like these are the ladies, I mean, they come in, they're like, I don't have any skills, I have no experience, and they start at 20 to 25. Mm-hmm. They quickly work their way up. So like she said, as you're like, the demand rises, or as they're putting more on your plate and you're like proving yourself to them and you're taking on more of their business, you can negotiate your rate at that point.
Mm-hmm. So whenever I started making upwards of $30 an hour and took on a full-time load, so I was booked out is the term that we use in the VA world. Whenever I got to that point in my income, I actually became the breadwinner of our home. And my husband's always had a stable career. When I first started as a VA, he actually worked at an automations plant. And so he was making pretty good money for our age and everything. He had amazing health benefits. But I just quickly started making more than him.
The Boys and Girls Club and in the chamber.
Yeah, so you were in nonprofits for a while, so yes, like it is easy to become a breadwinner whenever you're working for a nonprofit. But even now, as you manage banks locally, you manage 2 bank branches. So literally a bank manager, and I still make more than you. You're closer. You're getting rent in there.
How do you feel about this? Because a lot of the men around here, they're just like so hurt by like their wife even possibly making more than them. So
breadwinner is like synonymous with husband.
Yes.
I mean, and of course I want to be like, oh yeah, I bring home the bacon. Like I'm bringing home.
Okay, but also let me preface this with you're the one that I've never admitted that. I've never even thought about it. But I remember the first time we had friends from high school come and visit us at our house on Lincoln, and they came in and you were like showing them around the house, and then you showed them my office, and you're like, and this is where she makes all the money. This is where she's the breadwinner. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm surprised you're even telling them that.
Well, I mean, I thought it was important for them to know because I feel like a lot of times it's just not validated in that way because they feel like, oh, or like they'll say like, is she still doing that? Like, is she still
Like
working from
it's
home?
a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah, like, is she still, is it a thing? And I'm like,
Oh,
yeah.
is she still knitting? Is she still making?
And I wonder what the question is. I'm like, what do you really, is she still employed? Is that the
Mhm.
question? Like, I never
Still have a
really.
job.
Yeah.
Right, because they don't come to you and say, "Oh, are you still doing that? Are you
Yeah.
still doing that bank thing?
Are you still working for a
Yeah.
living? Yes. Yes, I am. And so are you. And still and I think because the focus has really shifted to remote work now,
Mhm.
everyone's like, oh, she must have got in early. I'm like, well, it's just been going on for 8 years in our
Mhm.
lives.
Mhm.
So it's not new to us. And now I think this has really shifted and people are really starting to focus on it in a whole different way.
Yeah,
But for someone that's
seeing
been
the
in
benefits of it and all of
But-
that.
but it was so much a thing before that. And I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that's the trouble with a lot of people now is that they think it's new.
Oh, I remember
Just
one of the
because.
conversations I had with one of the partners that I work with for the main client that I have. And it was when everything first started and people were working from home after like about a month. And he said that he had friends and family reaching out being like, oh my gosh, did you know that like Zoom is free and you can talk to this many people, like, and Slack, you can just have a team of like however many and like all these things. And he was just like, yeah, we've been doing this for like 20 years. I mean, this guy is in it for a while, but he's like, we've been doing this 20 years now. There's a lot of tools out there. It's all very cool. And he was just like, I've been trying to tell you this for a long time while you're in your brick and mortar, whatever.
But it definitely does not bother me to answer the question at all because I feel like it's so nice. It's so nice to have our combined incomes and to know that you are the breadwinner just with the money that we both make.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't feel any pressure. I mean, of course, I want to do the best that I can for our family, but it's just a nice relief.
Well, it's really nice, like, knowing that, like,
Totally.
my wife's home, like, if my kids have, like, practice or they need picked up from school or they're sick, like, she can go get them and she still is working. It's not like, I mean, it'll affect our jobs a little bit, but we can, like, work around our schedule, like, to take care of our kids when they're sick or to go to a doctor's appointment or to take them to practice. I like your answer. It was so positive. Like, I feel like around, like, especially where we're at, a lot of the men, like, are just, like, my wife cannot make $20 an hour.
Well,
because...
and they do say, like, well, then how are you going to take care of the kids? You got that question just yesterday.
Yeah, and like, what do kids do? A lot of people are like, what do your kids do? I'm just like, what do you mean? What do they do? They're like, what do they do?
Well, obviously,
when she's
she locks
working?
them in a dog cage all day while she works.
Like, well, we just had enough of them that they play together. Like,
But even, I mean, there are women that do this with one child.
Yeah.
Which honestly is, way easier. But I don't think it takes more children to make it doable.
No.
And I mean, they just do what kids do. They play games and are there in their rooms. They watch shows. They run around.
Yeah, they're kids. They just
and
play.
let me say this too. It's not the work that we're doing that allows us to have the time to go pick up our kids or to be a parent during the day while we're working. I strongly believe, and I've seen, almost all work can be done from home, and it's just the mentality behind the team that you're working with. So like, if your son has to go home from school and go to the doctor's office, usually the school will call the mother. Even if the mother does work a 9 to 5, they will call the mother. But they could even if the mother worked from home or stayed at home with younger kids, they could just as easily call the husband, and the husband could leave their work and go do that. It's because the mentality that has been normalized around corporate jobs that they think because you need to be there during opening hours or whatever, you have to be there working. Whereas like, most likely, whenever you could call, they're probably not doing anything super urgent that they could not leave for like whatever is the priority in their life anyway. It's just it's what's been normalized in society with that type of work relationship. So I don't want you guys to think that like, because we're not doing like anything throughout the day, that's why we can go and do that. It's just that it's so flexible.
Because it's the flexibility, yes. Because we can make our own schedules. I mean, most of our clients want us available maybe around a certain time where like if they need us, we're there. But if something did happen, like she was saying, like we have that flexibility to be able to tell our clients, which brings me in like, who are the clients that we work for? Like, what are the clients that these ladies would have?
So I think that's like one thing that a lot of people get really, held back onto. They're like, well, who are these people exactly? Like, are
they real?
Do they actually exist? Are they like foreign? Like, that sounds really sketchy to me. But usually they're the people that like, you already know, the same types of people. It's less common in the Midwest just because, everything that we already covered, it's just not, it's very very foreign. So most of the clients that you'll work with are going to be on the East Coast or the West Coast, or in places like Austin, Texas, where there are startup hubs. And that is because it's a very new way to work. And startups always look for the best and newest way to do things. So they have normalized virtual assistants for sure. But every single business owner or even a manager, like you were talking to someone about this just the other day.
I was.
But anybody can use an assistant, which obviously we've already covered. It's just understanding what you can use them for. But the people that have normalized it and already use us are just business owners. They're owners of boutiques. My longtime client has been a VP of engineering for different companies. You've worked with lots people who own construction,
construction,
investors, investment companies. I've worked for a producer, like a movie producer.
I've worked for 2 psychologists.
Yes, we have actually a lot of ladies that work for psychologists in our program. You can work for social media managers. You can even work under virtual assistants or OBMs that need to offload some of their work onto virtual assistants, which is called subcontracting. So the clients that you're working with are not these foreign people that you've never met before. They're usually the people that you interact with every day, the same type of people.
And I feel like I've seen people get bogged down by the work that they don't want to do, and it inhibits the growth that they need to do, the actual tasks that they want to be good at or are good at for their business. I saw that a lot at the chamber too, and I saw where people could really take advantage of assistants because they got trapped doing the things that the business had to do to function, but not that they really wanted to do, not what their passion was.
Yeah, we faced that just at the end of the summer, having been in business for only 5 months, and we were like, okay, we're too deep in the day-to-day that we're not being able to focus on, the future. And so we hired an assistant essentially, to do some things to take, our heads out of the things that don't really need our attention all the time. So it really does make a difference. And you cannot scale without an assistant.
No.
You cannot scale well, and you cannot scale long-term.
I feel it's the same thing as just think about a business owner, or think about even just this is such a common thing. You're at the dentist. Well, if that dentist just has him taking care of all these patients, that's not going to happen. If you go to any kind of dentist, he's going to have a few assistants, at least one assistant. So it's the same kind of thing. He or she could probably, get by, but they're going to be more
think when you get your teeth cleaned, how long are you with the dentist, and then how long are you with the hygienist?
Yes.
Maybe 5 minutes with the dentist.
Yeah. Maybe that.
But, they're the ones making the most money out of that whole situation. And they're, able to see so many clients because they have so many hygienists and whatever.
Yeah.
I was thinking about this just the other day, but most likely if you don't have an assistant, then you're probably super burnt out. You're probably overwhelmed, and you have major anxiety, and you've normalized that for yourself because you're like, well, hashtag entrepreneurial life or business owner, whatever. And yes, those moments come, and I think that they're important for fueling, your growth and all of that. But that is usually why a lot of people quit, because they just get too burnt out, they get too overwhelmed. They're like, okay, well, it's not worth it anymore. But an assistant, especially if you don't have any support team or a good enough one, an assistant can take care of that. And honestly, one assistant can be a whole support team depending on exactly what you're needing.
I feel like starting out, especially once I really got my foot in the door, I was running majority of their company.
Yeah.
And then I'm making $20 an hour, thinking okay, I'm making $20 an hour from home, but I'm running their companies and they're making thousands. So you are very, very important to them, and they make sure to tell you that. Literally, I was making doctor's appointments. He texted me back, and I texted him 4 doctor's appointments that I got scheduled, and he texted me back, and he was like, "You are so awesome." I'm
isn't that's the
yes,
best?
I am.
Yeah. And most likely you would not get that in a 9 to 5.
No.
How often does your boss call you and say, oh my God, you're a lifesaver, you're the best, you're a rock star?
It's rare.
Hopefully they do, but that's usually not the culture that's in a 9 to 5 workplace.
It's almost like they're doing you a favor.
Yeah.
When you're there,
you are employed,
yes.
I'm giving you a paycheck. We were talking about this with our girls just the other day, that whenever you are employed, it's a very selfish mindset that you have and the people you're working with, because you're performing based on either getting a raise or just continuing to get your paycheck each month. And as a virtual assistant, you're providing a service, so your work depends on, or I'm sorry, your performance depends on, you know, the growth of the company. So what you give in is going to show in the company because they're most likely they're going to grow whenever you're being able to like provide those services. And so it's it's much less self-centered because you like feel ownership over your work and the performance of the company or the person that you're working with. So it's very much more fulfilling.
It is.
And I think that's a neat thing to see too from the husband side, because once I saw that you understood your worth in your role and that you would have really, really good days.
Yeah.
And I would come home and I could just see that regardless of what the kids were doing or how other things were going or whatever was going on, you would have had a good day at work. I was like, oh, that's really cool. And you would be in a good mood. And I could see that you felt empowered in that way. And I was like, oh, this is really neat. And then the more that you would tell me about it and the more that I would understand what you did and like just get to know kind of what your role was more, I could just see that happiness in you. And it was so worth it just to have you be that way and have that happiness. And you just come home and you just had a whole day. And I'm like, oh my.
Sometimes you'll come home and say like, how was the day? And I'll answer and say like, well, work was great, but the kids, you need to go in there and talk to those kids.
But I think that's really cool though, because it could be scary in the beginning for a husband, I think, to get just to get on board with his wife spending that amount of money for one, or after the money just doing that full time or transitioning to full time. But once it's done and you're in it and you understand how you can sustain it, which is very easy,
and that your kids are fine,
and then your kids, and then it's all fine. It's just so rewarding to see from both sides, and it's just great.
Yeah, that's awesome. That is a good point, because when once I became a business owner, being a virtual assistant, your self-confidence just it boosts it so much, because you're like, wow, I feel so good about this, because you get so caught up in motherhood, or even if you're working a 9 to 5, you just get caught up of okay, well, I have to go to work and I've got to get this done and I've got to go home and I've got to take, so-and-so there to practice. I've got to take them to a doctor's appointment. I've got to clean the house. I got to cook dinner. And it's just so overwhelming. But when you're a business owner, you're like, okay, this is my schedule. You're making your own schedule. You feel so much more in control, which me as a control freak, I love it. And I'm like, okay, I can control my day. This is when this is going to happen. I mean, yes, things happen as you have kids. You got to roll with it sometimes.
Better to be home with it happening than in a office. And also, I will say, so it's very empowering. And I think that as moms, when you aren't in any sort of role where you're making your own income or feeling fulfillment outside of being a mother, which is one of the most fulfilling roles ever, if not the most, you look at other people and other women who have a small business or have this amazing career, and you think, okay, well, that's just for them. That's great. I could never live up to that. There's so many things, so many milestones that I have to hit before getting there that I'm just not going to even bother with that. And I honestly, this might set, maybe I'm the only person, but I compare that with being, in college and thinking of myself as an adult. One day I will do these things and I will make these decisions. And then you become an adult and you're like, these people don't know what they're doing either. They're learning as they go.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what it is. When you become a small business owner, you realize, oh, that coach that I follow that makes $1 million a month or whatever, she doesn't know what she's doing either. And it's all just, it's day by day. And I think Marie Forleo is the one that says the best way to get started is to just do it. Don't wait till you're ready. You just do it.
You're never going to be ready.
Yeah.
Something's always going to stand in the way. You're always going to have some kind of fear. There's never a perfect time for anything.
Yeah.
Just think about vacation. Everybody wants to go on vacation, but when is there actually a perfect time for vacation?
Or planning to have more babies.
Yes, there is. There's just no perfect time. Well, Zarod, thank you so much for joining us, and I loved your responses. By the way, he was not coached. This is clearly...
We literally threw this on him 5 minutes before, and he was like, okay.
He didn't even know the questions we were going to ask him. So, but I want to... Is there any last minute, our last advice you would like to give these husbands out there that are really hesitant about their wife starting a virtual assistant business?
Or the ladies that are still working on their husbands.
Yes.
Let them.
I would just say that it's so worth it just to have, and the thing that always amazes me too, I think about your role, is the people the influence that you have, the amount of influence that you control from the house. Like when I go to work, the things that I do, the people I talk to, it's all within the confines of the workspace. And I know that it's not that way everywhere, but a lot of times it is. And no matter what I do, all the things are just very close to me. And then I come home and you're like, oh, my clients over here, over there, you did these things, you fixed these problems for people all over the United States. I'm like, oh, what have I done today? What have I done with my day today? Like, what am I doing?
Like you've just normalized ordering from Amazon.
Yeah, and I'm like, oh, I had a really big day. And then I come back and you're like, well, I did this for these people over here. And I'm like, oh, how's Denver? Like, it's just, it's so crazy. And I think that it's just it's a great thing. And I love that you've done it for so long and it feels so normal.
You've even been able to go on some vacations with me based on my job.
Yeah, we've stayed in some nice places.
Yeah.
But it's definitely worth it. And to get started, I just don't think that it's that difficult at all for people to get started. I mean, I don't really understand any obstacles other than I think the mindset, which I feel like is something that's really been hijacked by a lot of people. That word and trying to change that and just that tone. It's a big bandwagon thing now. But I feel like that really is the hurdle. The struggle. Yeah,
mindset's a very like trendy word right now, but it is just your thought process and having a positive outlook and
believing in yourself.
Yes,
you just gotta believe in yourself, and the husband has to believe in you.
And we've had girls that join the program and their husbands still are not supportive,
but you would
even after they get clients.
You would take jobs that you felt less secure about. An actual job, you would take it before maybe you would even.
I think that. I can think of several stories offhand that I've heard like friends talk about their husbands purchasing something that's way more than, $1,000 or, whatever. And they end up doing it anyway, even though the wife's like, I really don't know about that. Like, I don't think we should be spending money on that. But the husband will do it anyway. And it's usually like a toy or something, not an investment opportunity.
Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Mother Together podcast.
If you want to hang out with us in real life, join our Facebook group, Mother Together. Go to Facebook, search Mother Together in groups, click join, and make sure to answer those questions.
See you in the group.